So a few more tips on getting started with your guides would be, please read through the Important Teacher Helps folder. Well, we have several documents in there, articles that we have written or we have found that are really important in implementing the guides and implementing the Charlotte Mason philosophy and methods with math. So please find the folder, and the documents are even numbered for you, so you can find the order in which we would love for you to read through those. And we just think that you will find those exceptionally helpful. We hope so. That is our prayer. The second thing would be that you want to find a way to organize all the materials so that they are easily accessible for you during your lesson times with your students. So Heather and I are going to talk about maybe some different ways of how we go about organizing based on our family, our students, the ages of our students. What we found just works for our family.
So starting with like the student math notebook, I've got 5th, 3rd, and 1st grade this year. So my girls all have individual ProClick binders for math. My oldest is just math. My younger ones are combined with other subjects. And so I organize by stream within those binders for when it applies. And then I currently have, not just in their student math notebook, they've got their grid paper, they've got their blank paper if they're doing geometry, and then they have their printables for the term. And I just use tabs in the notebook to make those easy to find. And once they use the printables, I will move those to wherever it lands in their written out lesson pages. And it's been really easy to keep track of. That's been a very easy, just hole punching ahead of time. The printables, having that in their notebook, just knowing everything's there and we can move it around has been really easy. And then having the cardstock printables, like the reference pages, they each have their own color-coded notebooks and folders. So they just have a plastic folder, like a 2-pocket one, doesn't really rip because it's plastic, that they have. I think on the left side they have the unused ones and the right side they have the used ones. So I just always have them bring their notebook and their folder, and they're responsible for that, because the less I have to be responsible for, the better, with lots of students. So that's how I've done it with the notebook. And you do it a little differently, I think.
Just a little bit. So my boys have binders, like notebooks, 3-ring binders, and they're separated with notebook dividers by strings. And so all their papers are in there. It depends on the age of the students. I have done it both ways, where the printables are in their notebooks. I've also stored printables, especially cardstock printables that don't come until later in the year, in an accordion style file folder, so that I can keep those nice and safe and students aren't losing those. So there are several different ways you can organize. So please experiment, play around with it. You might have to change it, and that's okay. I've also seen families use bound notebooks, like a composition style notebook with that, or a spiral bound notebook. The pro would be that papers aren't lost. And if you drop it, it's not going to explode all over the floor like our binders sometimes do. But you can't insert papers or printables or things like that. So that would be a con of the already bound style notebook.
Yeah. And I would say, as your students get older, get their input, because what I like to do in high school with my math notebooks was completely different than my siblings. So each kid's different too. And that's a place for them to take more responsibility as they get older.
And then another thing that you'll want to find your style, what works for you, would be in your teacher math notebook. So we picture this, I use mine for planning. So I have a calendar in there. I have the forms 1 and 2 review activities printed and placed in there. I have some helpful documents, resources that are from the Important Teacher Helps video or folder, and the flow chart, which we'll answer a question on that a little bit later, but the rubber meets the road flow chart, which is really helpful. Just several things like that I find really helpful to have, very accessible to me. Those are what I use my teacher math notebook for.
Yeah, I do similarly. The forms 1 and 2 review activities is actually on blue paper. So I don't even have to worry about finding it as quickly. And I have each, because there's different topics of addition activities you can do and subtraction. I have all those tabbed to make it even easier to flip, because depending on what year you're in, the year 1 and I think the year 2, I assigned those as suggested review activities. So I just found tabbing it on the longer right side of the page to make it easier to find those. I don't reference it a ton. It's mainly the forms 1 and 2 review activities that I use. I don't have a separate math calendar. I currently just, when I plan out my school year, look at our term overview page in the guide and map out all my lessons when I think they'll happen each week, leaving in the review days as we've built in. And then I just cross out and adjust as I go through the year. There's different ways to use it, but that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then another thing you'll want to think through is storing manipulatives and cards, because that can be a lot, especially for the younger students who have several things. So I use a plastic bin. I think it's like a craft bin for each one of my students based on what they're using that year. So all of our money goes in there, all of the little 2-color tokens go in there. The compasses, rulers, protractors, they all fit into that bin. And that's individualized for each student, so they can just grab their bin and it has everything that they need. It also has all the cards that I've printed out in little plastic baggies, and they are kind of in the bottom. And I've labeled those with a sticky note taped onto the plastic baggie. It is super simple. So do you have a way that you organize your mini?
Yeah, I have so I do some of that. I have the math wrap-ups, and I'm trying to think what else I have so the math wrap-ups, and then the beads with like the binder ring. I forget what the rings are called, that clasp. I tend to only use those in year 1. So those are kind of in their own container with a couple other things that are bigger. Our like plastic clock. Like I don't store that, and all my kids end up using that at some point. So things that I think they'll use. So I try to think of it in 2 ways. One, if I'm teaching 2 students at once, will they each need their own set? So that's what goes in their individual bins, like the 2-color counters, the money. And then I also try to think what is easier just to access once. What do I want 4 of with all my students? So like the popsicle sticks are just in a plastic basket that sit on my cart always, and I can pull those out for whoever needs them in the younger years. And then the cards, I actually don't break those out by student. I just have those in an index card, like a plastic index card holder, and they're just tabbed, like addition, whatever, fraction, review, metric system. They're in plastic baggies to make them easier to pull in and out, but I just have them all labeled. And then with those, I often don't even print and cut them out often. I often write them on the fly on 3x5 cards. Yeah. I just find it's easier to have it bigger for me. So I deviate a little. I think we say that in our guides, like you can do it either way, but that is just what I found easier for me to do.